Namaskar. Welcome to the third session on Bhagavad Gita Chapter 2. Did you know? Every week, our community members receive a dose of inspiration through Wednesday Wisdom. Dive deeper into yourself with powerful insights from the Gita. Don't miss out. Join our vibrant community today at vedantavision.org/WhatsApp. I now request Jayaji to continue with Chapter 2.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
The one thing in common between all human beings all over the world is that all of us experience a sense of emptiness, a void. We feel something is missing in life. And because of this, we go out into the world and seek worldly things, worldly objects, worldly satisfaction, but we are never fulfilled. Why is this? Our ancient masters have explained this. They say, even as you experience this emptiness, you are in fact paripurna, purna, whole, complete, fulfilled. Paripurna, totally filled. Then what is the problem? For some strange reason, you don't know you're full and you imagine an emptiness. So, as a result of this imaginary void, you go out into the world trying to get objects and beings to fill that void, and you never succeed. This void cannot be filled because it's not for real. If there were if there were a real emptiness, you could fill it. But if it's imaginary, you can't fill it. The only way that it will be filled is through knowledge of your fullness. So this should be given utmost priority in life. Nothing else. No fulfilling desires, no achieving ambitions, no running after wealth or fame. All that goes to the back burner. What takes priority is gain knowledge of your fullness. Ignorance is the cause of all our problems. Because of ignorance, you have a wrong understanding of things, you make a wrong assessment of people and things. And when these expectations are not met with, you get bitter, you get frustrated, you get depressed, and all the mental health issues in the world arise from just this, ignorance. So this chapter, as we saw last time, is about Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, which takes care of all our problems. So for now, we move with verse 15.
यं हि न व्यथयन्ते ते पुरुषं पुरुषर्षभ समदुःखसुखं धीरं सोऽमृतत्वाय कल्पते.
O Purusharshava, bull among men. One is fit for immortality when one is not troubled by them, is equal to joy and sorrow, and is steady. So he addresses Arjuna and all of us as bull among men. In India, the bull and cow are worshipped. And there is a reason for that. that they seem to live by the principle, the dictum of maximum work, minimum profit. This is the exact opposite of how we are all living or working. We do the minimum work and we want maximum profit. So, in verse 14, he said, develop titiksha, which is a fabulous quality that is there still in India, which is the capacity to bear with discomfort, with inconvenience, with pain, with pleasure. So the joy of being with relatives or the joy of being with friends eclipses the pain or the inconvenience of having them around. Which is why in our childhood, during the summer vacation, you only went to the grandmother's place, you went to an aunt's place, you went to spend the vacation with a cousin, and there would be 15 kids under one roof and so many more adults. So there was that inconvenience of having to share rooms, having to share bathrooms, having to make allowances and adjustments with people. But this was nothing compared to the joy of just being together and having fun and playing mischief. And the highlight of our vacation was this. It is so unfortunate that this enjoyment has gone completely now. So you want to go on vacation to expensive resorts all over the world, draining the country of valuable foreign exchange, because you have missed out on this. This was not expensive, but the joy content in that was so great. And we were able to live like this because of the capacity of titiksha, the ability to bear with a little bit of inconvenience, to bear with some discomfort, because of the joy that was so overwhelming. So when people came, when guests came over to spend the summer vacation with us, we would be thrilled, happy, overjoyed. And when it was time for them to go, everybody would cry as if there was a death in the family. Nowadays, it's the other way around. When guests come, you cry. And when they are saying goodbye, you can't contain your joy that people are going away. Sad. So, in verse 14, he spoke of titiksha. Now he goes one step further and says, you are fit for immortality. When you're not troubled by this impermanent, passing, coming and going of sense objects. So, you're not troubled by them and you're samam, equal to them, because you're established in a higher joy. And you're dhiram, steady through these fluctuations. Because you understand that the intrinsic value of the world and all that it has to offer is essentially zero. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, you collect 7 zeros, you still have 0. He didn't say don't collect worldly things. Collect them by all means. But don't forget to put a 1 before the zeros. The moment you put a 1 before 7 zeros, there is tremendous value addition. Now we've forgotten the 1. The 1 is spiritual content, is the spiritual base. And if you forget that, it's like forgetting to put a 1 before the zeros. So it's very important to understand what the world is, to make the right assessment, and then you have no unreasonable expectations of the world and no frustration. You accept the world for what it is, enjoy it while the good things are there. But don't grieve when they go, because they have to go. So, these pairs of opposites that are inherent in the world, you create them, you make a big deal of them, because you have strong likes and dislikes. See, there will be good food, there will be bad food. But if you have a strong like and a dislike, then you can be happy only when you get what you like. You cannot be happy when the world presents you with what you dislike and you have no control over what the world has to offer. So you're in a precarious condition, totally dependent on the world, with no control over the world. So you create these pairs of opposites because of strong likes and dislikes. Then you identify with them and you suffer when they're not provided to you. They will never be provided to you all the time. And even if they are provided, your mind changes. What you liked 5 years ago is perhaps what you don't like now. And it keeps changing. So how do you rise above this? Have a vision of something grander, something nobler, something more meaningful than just running after sense objects. And then you have a purpose in life. You have a mission in life. And every morning you wake up exhilarated because you have one more day to fulfill that mission. Otherwise, without all this, you wake up in the morning only looking for enjoyment. Which new restaurant do I go to eat? Whom do I catch for company? And where do I entertain myself? Which is the next movie on Netflix or OTT platforms. This is all that consumes us. And this will never give us happiness. So, fix a higher ideal in life that will serve others, not just your self-centered interests. And you will not only be successful, but happy, and you'll grow as a person. Next verse, 16.
नासतो विद्यते भावः नाभावो विद्यते सतः उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्तः त्वनयोस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः.
The unreal does not exist. The real never cease to exist. The seers of truth, Tattvadarshi, have realized the essence of both these. Now, with this verse onwards, we begin a solemn, deep truth of life. And remember, he's talking about the indestructibility of the soul, of Atman, of the real you. So all these verses require reflection, thinking, dwelling on them, staying with these ideas, bathing your mind in these ideas will make you soak in the thought of the higher. And then these lower fluctuations will not affect you. So try it. It's very, very simple. The words used are so simple even a child can understand. But the deeper import of that verse, you'll be lucky to get it in this lifetime. So spend some time over these verses. What is he saying here? The unreal has never existed, will never be, like horns on the head of a man. It has never been in the past. You never see a human being with horns, and you never will. So this is unreal. It has never existed. It does not exist. The real never ceases to exist. Just because you don't know it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The knowers of truth, Tattvadarshi, have realized the essence of both these. So, you go through grief, you go through trauma, You don't need solace, you need knowledge. And all of us go looking for solace. And the more you think of yourself and your grief, the more you will drown in that grief. All you have to do is rise above it and identify with someone else's grief and look at how you can help the other person rise above it. There's a man who lost his son and who went to a guru, weeping in deep sorrow. Because the worst thing that can happen to a person is to lose the child. You're alive, you lose the child. So in this deep agony, he goes to a guru and says, please help me. I somehow want to get over this. So the guru says, you have to do something for this. He says, I'll do anything, Guruji. So he tells him, get me a little bit of salt from a home that has never known grief. So he goes thinking it's very easy because he thinks that he is going through the worst grief and nobody else is going through it. And every home he goes to, he finds that they are all suffering from something or the other. They're all grieving over something. And then slowly, he begins to understand that my grief is nothing compared to what these people are going through. And he starts helping them. He looks at the situation from their point of view. And as he looks at their problems, his grief vanishes. He never needs to go back to the Guru. So, this is it. The unreal has never existed. What is the unreal? So, for this you must understand the definition of reality is that which existed in the past, present and future is present at all periods of time. So, with this definition, if you view the waking, dream and deep sleep states, all three fail the test of reality. What Vedanta tells us is all these three states are not real because, let's say, the waking state is real now. It wasn't there last night. It will not be there tonight. So also with the dream and the deep sleep states. So they are not real. They are not unreal either because you are experiencing them now. They are real for you now. Then what are they? There's a beautiful term for it that was coined by these masters many thousands of years ago, and they called it Maya. Maya means not that. How else can you explain it? It's an illusion. It's there now. It will not be there later. It wasn't there before. So don't sell your soul to something that is not real. You can't call it unreal either. And what is it? Just Maya. It's like on a hot day, a weary traveler is thirsty, looking for water. And he looks out in the distance in the desert and sees water. And he's rushing towards that. The wise old man of the desert tells him, don't go there, there is no water there. The oasis is in the opposite direction. So he turns, looks in the direction of the oasis, doesn't see water. He turns back, not listening to that old man, goes rushing towards what he sees as water, uses up the last resources of energy in running after a mirage and dies. This, friends, is the story of all of us. We are also running after a mirage somewhere or the other. And we use all our energy, all our resources to get there. Some of us die before getting there. Others get there only to realize so bitterly, so much disappointment that there's nothing there. So, there must be that suspicion that maybe what these masters are saying is right, even though in our experience it doesn't seem right. So when you wake up tomorrow, say, could this be an illusion? Could this, the waking state, be as unreal as the dream that I already know is a fictional thing? This makes you philosophical. This makes you objective. This frees you from the trauma of life.
अविनाशि तु तद्विद्धि येन सर्वमिदं ततं विनाशमव्ययस्यास्य न कश्चित् कर्तुमर्हति.
So, physics also says that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. It just gets transferred from one form to another. Take a mud pot, break it. What have you done? The pot has gone, the mud remains. Mud you can never destroy. The pot you can destroy, it's just nama rupa, it's a name and form. Ornaments, gold ornaments, you melt them. The ornament is gone, but the gold remains. The gold can never be destroyed. Smash waves. Waves are gone, but the ocean remains. Similarly, dreams can be destroyed. You can start a nuclear explosion in the dream. The dream will get destroyed. The waker's mind is untouched. No nuclear bomb of the dream can destroy the waker. The waker's mind remains. Similarly, all that we have here goes. But the essence, the spirit, Atman, remains. That is your real personality. And you have to keep telling yourself this, because the law is as you think, so you become. Unfortunately, we've been thinking of matter, body, mind, intellect. We've become body, mind, intellect. And we are getting traumatized by the world. All you have to do is shift your thinking. Tat Brahma Nishkalamaham, that indivisible Brahman am I. Nacha Bhuta Sangha, not this assemblage of elements. So live life like the way you've lived life. You don't need to change your lifestyle. You don't need to change anything about you except your thoughts. While you're enjoying whatever it is that you're enjoying in the world, just think, maybe, just maybe, this is a dream and it will vanish in a matter of seconds. That is being philosophical. Next verse, 18.
अन्तवन्त इमे देहाः नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः अनाशिनो प्रमेयस्य तस्माद्युध्यस्व भारत.
It is said that the bodies of the eternal, indestructible, immeasurable indweller come to an end. Hence, O Bharata, fight. What an inspiring verse this is, if you really understand the import, the message. What is he saying here? He's saying, every person born must die. The body will die. The body of, meaning the body is your possession. It is not you. Then who are you? The indestructible, immeasurable, indweller. The person living in this body. Just as you live in your home, you are not the home. You drive in a car, you are not the car. You fly in a plane, You are not the plane. So the car might burn down. You exit the plane. You leave your home. But you remain intact. In the same way, the body is only a container that takes you from place to place. It's like there are many, many mirrors. Wherever there is a reflecting surface, a reflected sun appears. But the real sun above is only one. The rest are just imagination. Bulbs are many. Electricity is one. Similarly, bodies are many. Spirit is one, indestructible, immeasurable. Atman does not die when the body dies. So identify with Atman, you're not affected by the fluctuations of the body, not just physical body, even mind and intellect. Just as when the bulb fuses, you simply change the bulb. You don't sit there and cry that, oh, electricity has gone. When the mirror breaks, you just change the mirror. You don't have to mourn the loss of the sun. Sun doesn't even understand what is happening. Doesn't understand the mirror breaking, doesn't understand the death of the reflected sun, doesn't understand why you're grieving. Because it's there.
य एनं वेत्ति हन्तारम् यश्चैनं मन्यते हतम् उभौ तौ न विजानीतः नायं हन्ति न हन्यते.
So, Atman, the real you, is the source of all activity, all vibrancy, all dynamism, energy and vitality. Immense vitality it has. But it has no desire to act. It enables all of this, all your actions, your thoughts, your emotions, your impulses. You can't move a finger without Atman being there. Yet, Atman has no desire to act or not to act. Just as fuel in a car has no desire to take you to Pune or to take you to Santa Cruz, or not go at all. But without fuel, no car can move. And the second is, Atman has nothing to do with the quality of the action. It has no impact on the quality of the action. Just as fuel has nothing to do with the performance of the car. The performance depends on the engine. Similarly, it is your internal engine that determines the quality of the action, whether you are noble, ignoble, selfish, unselfish. You're like a sage or a criminal. That depends on your internal engine, which is mind, intellect, vasanas. So, just as electricity has no impact on the light that emits from a bulb, that depends on the filament. Electricity in a night bulb, 0-watt bulb, emits dim light. In your home, medium light. In a flood, in a football field, tremendous light. But the electricity in all is the same. Similarly, the third thing, is that it is not affected by the outcome. The outcome of a car moving can be an accident, can be safe driving. Fuel is not affected. Similarly, Atman is not affected whether you perform criminal activity or divine activity. Atman is neutral, objective, 100% objective. So once you understand this and identify with Atman, you will become like Atman. You will enable, empower all kinds of activity. You become a powerful person. But you have no desire to do anything. And the result has no impact on you. You're not affected by the result, whether it is success or failure. And you have nothing to do with the quality of action. So you become like Atman. More and more objective you become, the more you enjoy life, the more successful you become because you're more powerful. The happier you are, you're unaffected by what's happening around you, and you grow into a towering personality. So you have to keep telling yourself this. See, observe what happens to you. Whenever there is attachment, wherever there is a stake in what's happening, your mind gets agitated. Which is why a doctor never operates on his own family members. What happens? The moment he thinks, oh, this is my daughter, there is a connection, there's an attachment, the mind gets agitated, he is unable to operate, unable to act. All his knowledge, the years of hard work that he's put in, and he may be the best surgeon in town, becomes completely useless because of attachment. Therefore, they say, no doctor operates on his family members. That is why a parent usually is not a good coach to a child, because of the attachment, because of the expectations, because you're riding on it, you're obsessed with it. A couple, husband and wife, should never work together at work because of the same thing. Then you start imagining, oh, this must be what he wants, this must be what she wants, and you ruin the interaction and the relationship. But when there is no connection, you're objective, you work fine with the person. So this is something that is very, very useful, very practical, something that we need to implement in our lives. Practice objectivity. And then the beauty of life emerges. Verse 20. You want to stop it?
न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे.
This is neither born nor does it die. Existing now, it will never cease to exist. This is unborn, eternal, immaculate, and permanent. It is not slain when the body is slain. So, you see, the problem is, how do you explain what Atman is? Even physical things are so difficult to explain. Let's say you are trying to explain what a mango is to a person who's never tasted a mango, who's never seen a mango. How do you do it? Beyond a point, you say, oh, just have it, then you'll understand. Emotional. When you feel intense love for your child, how do you express it? You see a parent expressing love to a child, it is hilarious from one aspect. It is, and you can't even understand because it goes beyond language. The parent makes sounds that make no sense, but the child understands. So what the parent is conveying is love, and words, language break down in the subtlety of the emotion that you're trying to convey. That is why when two lovers meet, there is usually silence between them. How can you can't, you say I love you, it destroys the emotion. Intellectual is even more difficult. That's why all like physics and math is explained through formulae. And when it comes to spiritual, it is impossible. You cannot put it in words. And yet, these people, our ancestors, have done such a magnificent job in conveying that which cannot be conveyed. But you have to cooperate with them. You have to go along with them and develop the subtlety with which you can pick up a few things from what they're trying to convey. So he's saying, he's giving pointers. Now these are only pointers, they're not definitions. Ajaha, unborn, no birth means no death, means no change. That which is changeless, that changeless entity against which all changes in the world are happening. Nitya, eternal. See, when you were a child, you said, I'm a child. Then I am a young boy or girl. I am a teenager. I am a young adult. And very soon you will say, I'm an old person. The infant is not the child, is not the young girl or boy, is not the teenager, is not the adult. They are all different. Different weight, different size, different everything. But with reference to all of them, you say, I am. That I is the constant. But the moment you say I, you define it, you modify it, you qualify it, and you destroy that I. Because if you were to be told, just think of I without any qualifications, you can't. Because you've never given yourself a chance to view that I as it is, without anything. So, eternal. In the midst of all these changes, you are maintained. I goes on. Shashvata, changeless. Atman is the only thing that remains the same in the past, present, and future. Everything else changes. You change, the world changes, everything in the world changes. And so you need a changeless entity against which you can measure the change or recognize the change. If there is no changeless entity, you cannot see the change. Now, if you look up in the sky and a plane is moving, unless there is a cloud or something against which you see the plane, you don't realize the plane is moving at 500 miles an hour. Purana, ancient. Now, people misunderstand this and present or picturize gods and sages as old people with long white beards. They're not old. Purana, ancient, means that which was present before time. So, time is the interval between two experiences. And that's how you measure. That's how within you get a feel of time. So, when your experiences are many and fast, time seems to fly. And when your experiences are slow, time seems to hang. Why? Because the unit of time in our mind is the interval between two experiences. Now, Atman was present even before the first experience, therefore ancient, beyond time. Now again, these concepts are not to be explained, there's very little explanation here, but they are to be reflected upon in your quiet moments, first thing in the morning when you wake up, instead of looking at what the stock market went, whether it went up or down, or what is happening in Russia, be with yourself and reflect over these concepts. This will give you that power. Even now, you should be experiencing it. The peace and the power. 21.
वेदाविनाशिनं नित्यं य एनमजमव्ययम् कथं स पुरुषः पार्थ कं घातयति हन्तिकम्.
O Partha, how can a person who knows this as indestructible, eternal, unborn and undecaying kill or induce another to be killed? So, when you understand yourself and all beings as Atman, then you can't destroy another person. Nobody else can destroy you. There is nothing to be done except do your karyam karma. If you're a carpenter, do carpentry. If you're an electrician, do an electrician's job. If you're a warrior, a soldier, kill, fight. That's all you have to do. Don't interfere with the pattern of the world. Don't interfere with the totality, because that's not your place in life. That is what he's saying. Now don't confuse this with killing. It's not about killing. It's about understanding that what is permanent in life, what really matters in life, what you should be concerned with is just spirit, Atman, your real personality. And if you haven't realized that, your mission in life is to get there, that's all. Don't mess with people. Don't get involved in things. Don't get attached to people. Don't destroy other people. Because attachment destroys. So, what must you do? Just do what you ought to do. This moment, what is it that you ought to do? Do it to the best of your ability and exit when the time comes. Graciously, in a royal manner, like a king does what he has to do. It doesn't get involved with anything. So he appears in the darbar, he does what he has to do and retreats back into the palace. That is your role. You're a king. You go out of yourself to do what you have to do. And when your job is done, go back, retreat within yourself and maintain this contact with Atman. It's a beautiful verse. And then you realize that your grief is all self-created. Why are you getting agitated? You trace your agitation to its root, there's nothing there. And when you understand that, you will laugh at your own stupidity. You laugh at your own foolishness, childishness. It's like a child crying and crying and crying because the friend has taken away one marble from him or has eaten one more chocolate than him. So he's not worried about the fact that he has eaten enough chocolate. He is concerned that the friend has eaten one more than him. And he cries over it. There is no solution to this. So what does the parent do? A sensible parent doesn't sit there and say, oh, your friend is bad, he's selfish, he's this, that and the other. He just says, it's okay, tomorrow you have one more chocolate than the friend. Finish, that's it. Oh, he's eaten one more chocolate, his stomach will ache more than yours. Something to appease that crying. And what we are engaged in is exactly the same thing. If you view it from a more mature viewpoint. And that vision, if you have while you are going through this childishness, that's when you start laughing at yourself. That's why they say, go through life tongue in cheek. You know, there's a beautiful phrase in English. Tongue in cheek means objectively. You act as if your life depends on it, knowing fully well that it doesn't matter. That's what it is. It's like playing chess with your own child. Are you really interested in winning? No. You want to give your child the pleasure of playing chess and the pleasure of defeating you. So even though you are smarter than the child, even though you can effortlessly win, you deliberately lose and allow the child to win to give him the pleasure. So your loss does not affect you. That's what he's saying here. So how can a person who knows this, means knows Atman, knows your personality as indestructible, eternal, unborn and undecaying, how can you, I mean, such an individual can never be affected by anything that's happening. And yet, you must do what you have to do. So you do it. It's like a police officer doesn't hate a criminal. If he does, he has no business being a police officer. Then what is he doing? He's just doing his job. When he sees that here is a criminal who has done something, he will put in all his efforts to see that he is convicted. That's it. And even when he appears in court or whatever he has to do, it seems as if he has disgust and hatred for the criminal. But within himself, he's free. Just as a judge has no hatred towards a person that the judge convicts. The judge is just doing his job. Similarly, you and I have to do our jobs, have to do what we have to do, our karyam karma. And in the process, if somebody gets hurt, if somebody gets affected because of his or her foolishness, so be it. You're not responsible for it. This is what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna. You have no business getting into the situation and saying, who am I fighting with? Do they deserve it? Are they worthy of respect? All this is not your problem. Just thinking of these ideas gives so much relief. Can you imagine what will happen when we start living them? Next verse, 22.
वासांसि जीर्णानि यथा विहाय नवानि गृह्णाति नरोपराणि तथा शरीराणि विहाय जीर्णानि अन्यानि संयाति नवानि देहि.
This verse clearly explains the theory of reincarnation, what actually happens in a very simple manner, giving a very, very ordinary, everyday experience that we all go through. So what he's saying here is, as a person abandons tattered clothes to wear new ones, so the indweller abandons jaded bodies to enter new ones. So let's understand what happens when you change clothes. So there are worn out clothes, clothes that have lost its color, its sheen, have perhaps torn. They are no longer suitable for you to wear them. So what do? You discard these old clothes and wear new ones that are more suited for you to present yourself in society and to live life. normally. Same thing is saying. So, just like that, a person whose body has become jaded, is ill, is weak, has all kinds of problems. But you are still full of desires. You need to act out those desires. This body is no longer suitable. It is a burden on you. It's not suitable for you to fulfill your desires. So, nature gives us an opportunity to discard this body and take on a fresh one. And then you can start with greater enthusiasm and energy and vitality to move on in your journey of life. This is death of the former and birth of the latter. Now, when you understand it like this, where is the grief? Why will you grieve? Do you grieve when your child goes to an American university to study? Temporarily you feel sorry, you miss the child. But deep down you're happy he's moved on to better things, to a better career, a better life. Where is the grief? Grief is when you don't know. You don't know what's happening. And this metaphor fits in so beautifully. See, the clothes are like your physical body. They are your apparel. It is the wearer who decides the change, right? You are wearing the clothes. You decide that these clothes are no longer convenient for me. They don't suit me. I need to discard them. So you throw them away and you go shopping and you buy new ones. You wear new ones. You decide the change. Similarly, in the same manner, it is the subtle body, your mind, intellect and vasanas that demand a change, that determine the change, that decide where you're going, when to give up this body and in what manner to go. The only thing is you don't know. It is not a conscious decision. It is your vasanas and your desires that are making this happen. So there should be no grief. There is no place for grief. Then it is the wearer who gives the vitality to the clothes. You see clothes hanging. Is there any beauty in it? Is there any thing? It's only you. Nowadays there's a mannequin. You put the clothes on that, then they appear somewhat attractive. But the real beauty comes when a person wears them. So it is the wearer who gives the vitality to the clothes. Similarly, it is your subtle body that gives the vitality, gives the energy, gives the beauty to your physical body. The body by itself has no attraction. And yet we are ready to give an arm and a leg for the body. We become body worshippers. So we Botox ourselves, we do all kinds of things to appear good. Not understanding that it is your inner personality that lends a charm, a beauty, the vitality, that energy to the body. It is not the body. Therefore it is that in the Dhyana shlokas which are in praise of the Bhagavad Gita, they describe Vyasa as a beautiful personality. The truth was that Vyasa was apparently so ugly that people would hesitate to look at him if they did not understand. So you see, the beauty is he was sent to father the children of the two queens. So one, when he approached her, he was so ugly that she shut her eyes. And that was Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was born. But their maid went beyond the physical appearance and simply adored Vyasa because he was a spiritually evolved person, a wonderful person. And her attitude towards him was completely different. So, it's the subtle body that gives character to the body, physical body. Focus there more than on the body itself. The wearer needs clothes. I mean, without wearing clothes, you can't leave your home. You can't leave your bathroom. To express yourself, you need clothes. Similarly, the subtle body cannot exist by itself. It needs a physical body. So this keeps changing again and again. That's why Shankaracharya says, Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. And who decides this? You yourself, because you're cultivating desires at a breakneck speed and different desires. So you ensure that you are subject to this painful, traumatic change of constant birth and death. Another interesting thing is, it is the wearer who decides how often to change. A rich man changes clothes maybe thrice a day. In the morning, he goes and plays golf, comes back, wears clothes, wears a nice suit to go to work, comes back, then relaxes at home with friends, so he wears informal clothes, and then night clothes. So in a day, he might change 4 or 5 times. A poor person changes clothes maybe once in 3 days because he doesn't have the resources. Now in life, a person rich with desires and vasanas, with too many desires and vasanas, has to go through this traumatic change very often because he has these desires. As you evolve spiritually, a spiritual master is left with only very few desires. Desires to serve the Guru, desires to do good to society, desire predominantly to get to the state of realization. Such a person doesn't go through this change often, leads a more sedate, serene, tranquil life. So therefore, it is all in our hands. You can change your thoughts now, right now. You can choose to jump off this consumerist society where you are encouraged to want more, buy more, have more. This mindset to a life where you are content and you buy only when your intellect decides. So you are in charge of everything. Now there are 3 kinds of views, 3 different angles in which they view birth and death. So the basic is that the body is everything and therefore death is a finality. Finish, that's it. There's nothing more. Second view, intermediate view, is like body is like the clothing. It gets discarded and you take on a new body. But the truth, the real essence of all that is happening is that you are Atman. And that your purpose in life, your mission in life is to get to realization from which there will be no more rebirth and your existing body also will be discarded. The body drops of its own accord because it is no longer needed by you. So, when just the gross body, your physical body is discarded, you take on a new birth. This is called reincarnation. But when your entire personality is dissolved, the subtle body, causal body, mind, intellect, vasanas are discarded, along with the physical body, you reach realization.
नैनं छिन्दन्ति शस्त्राणि नैनं दहति पावकः न चैनं क्लेदयन्त्यापः न शोषयति मारुतः.
Verse 23 is a very, very famous verse. Many of you might have heard it, might have read about it, because it is often used when there is death in the family. Nainam chindanti shastrani. No weapons can cut this. No fire can burn this. No water can wet this. No wind dry it. So, now you need to understand how it functions. So there is Brahman, God, Atman at one end, which is unmanifest. And then there is the world. When you come to the world, it is manifestation. And the world consists of 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth. Now, what he's saying here is that he details each of the 5 elements and says they have no effect on Brahman. So there are 2 things here. One is, because of the subtlety, anything gross cannot affect the subtle. Number 2, the gross cannot control the subtle. It is the other way around. The subtle controls the gross. It's like when the mind is agitated, you might get an upset stomach, which has nothing to do with physical things. You haven't eaten anything wrong. It's just when the mind is agitated, your physiological functions go astray. When a person falls in love, loses hunger, says, I'm not hungry, I'll eat anything, it's okay. So the lower desires go as a result of your being fulfilled in the higher. So what he's saying here is, fire, he says, uses fire because fire is the first element to be seen, and therefore all religions use fire as a symbol of God. Fire cannot burn it because the fire needs an object other than itself to burn. And Brahman is the only thing, there is nothing other than Brahman. Water, only a porous substance can become wet. Here there is no porous substance. Wind, there should be water to dry it. There is no water, there is no second thing. Weapons can't kill because it's too subtle. A knife can't cut your thought. Forget Atman. So it's like different projections on the screen. You show a movie with fire, the next you show the Titanic with water gushing everywhere. In the third you show a criminal killing his victim. But the screen remains untouched. It is not heated, it is not wet, it is not cut. Because all this is a projection on the screen. The same thing here. That is why in English also they say, stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. Minds, innocent and quiet, take that for a hermitage. You put a Mahatma in prison, he is very happy because he is left alone. People don't come to him and his basic needs are taken care of. So, what are you? You can't imprison the mind. 24.
अच्छेद्योऽयमदाह्योऽयम् अक्लेद्यो शोष्य एव च नित्यः सर्वगतस्थाणुः अचलोऽयं सनातनः.
Being eternal, all-pervading, steady, immovable and permanent. This cannot be cut, nor can it be burnt, wet or dried. So this is a different way of putting the same verse. Verse 23, he's putting in a different way. Because you might think that the weapons of today don't affect Atman, maybe tomorrow's weapons might. So he says it cannot be done. There's a finality to it. Nitya, eternal. Sarvagata, all-pervading, just as the mind pervades every aspect of the dream. There is no place in the dream where the mind does not exist. Sthanu, steady. Achala, immovable. Puts it in the present, positive and negative. Sanatana, permanent. So, it's the same thing, verse 23, put in a different way. And as I said earlier, these are not verses that can be explained, they have to be reflected upon. You have to say, I am eternal. I pervade everywhere. I am steady. I am immovable and I am permanent. And then you say, this doesn't match with what I think of myself. Because when we say I, we mean body, mind, intellect. He's talking about I as in Atman. Next verse, 25.
अव्यक्तोऽयमचिन्त्योऽयम् अविकार्योऽयमुच्यते तस्मादेवं विदित्वैनं नानुशोचितुमर्हसि.
It is said that this is unmanifest, inconceivable, changeless. Knowing this, therefore, it is not proper for you to mourn. So, again, he's giving these pointers, 3 more pointers. Avyakta, unmanifest. Achintya, inconceivable because it's beyond the intellect. And avikarya, changeless. Now, when you know that you are unmanifest, inconceivable, and changeless, and so is the other person, there is no grief. When you understand that you can't really hurt anybody, you can't kill anybody, you can't do anything to another person or even to yourself, and what are you doing? You're just doing your duty. Do it to the best of your ability. So friends, we need to think about these pointers. And as we saw earlier, the more you think about them, the law is as you think, so you become. So your identification shifts from body, mind, and intellect, matter, to Atman, spirit. And then you begin to experience the power of Atman. You begin to experience the happiness that comes from not being involved with body, mind, and intellect, and not being attached to anything in the world. Just learn the art of saying no thank you to the world. Anything that the world offers you, within your mind you say no thank you. I have no value for this. You might take it, you might earn it, you might work for it, but within yourself there is that zero. Your needle doesn't shift. Either with the greatest of benefits, you may hit a lottery, a jackpot, or the worst possible thing that can happen to you. You lose a family member. You are samam. You are dhiram, steady, and you're strong. You lend support to others. And then you become an epitome of joy, cheer, happiness, and you spread this happiness to everyone, just as Krishna did. He was irresistible. He was charming. He was strong and protected the poor. This is what you will become if you just invest a little bit of your thoughts, your mental energies on these pointers. Thank you.